I do want to thank ASPCA for their sponsorship of this workshop. So thank ASPCA for making this possible. So for those of you who are joining us virtually, we do ask that you stay muted during the presentations. The way this is going to work is we'll do a Q&A at the end of the presentations. And so if you have any questions as we go along, again, for those of you who are on virtually, please put those questions in the chat or write them down and save them for the end. Anna will be helping to keep track of those questions that are in the chat. And our speakers for today, who I'll introduce in just a minute, are basically going to alternate among the three of them for the presentation. We are going to have a break at about 1:45, 1:50-ish time frame to do a little, use the restroom, get some more water, get up and stretch. And then we'll come back, finish the presentation, and have, we hope, at least 30 to 45 minutes for Q&A. Make sense? All right. So our speakers for today are April Steele, who is president and CEO of Dumb Friends League it says in Denver, Colorado, but Denver, Castle Rock, Alamosa. After practicing veterinary medicine for 18 years, she had the honor of joining Dumb Friends League in 2014 to advocate for animals who are vulnerable due to homelessness and mistreatment or their owner's financial situation. Since becoming CEO in 2018, she's overseen the expansion of the League's impact to include a veterinary hospital that provides subsidized veterinary care, for which those of you who are here, there will be a tour of the Dumb Friends League's Spur Veterinary Hospital at the end of the presentation if you want to stay for that. So the expansion of the hospital, a $43 million shelter renovation. She helped develop the socially conscious animal community framework and enhance animal welfare opportunities in rural Colorado. She's currently a board member for the are you chair? She's currently chair of the Association for Animal Welfare Advancement Board, is a certified animal welfare administrator. She served as a delegate to the American Veterinary Medical Association and has served as president of the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association, the Denver Area Veterinary Medical Society, the Animal Assistance Foundation, and the American Association of Feline Practitioners. April is also a veteran of the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps. Then second will be Dr. Wayne Jensen, who is presenting virtually. Dr. Wayne Jensen received his DVM from Colorado State University in 1984. After completing a small animal clinical internship at Iowa State University, he returned to CSU for a residency and PhD in pathology. In 2003, he again returned to CSU for an MBA degree. Clearly, Wayne, you couldn't get enough education. His 40 years of experience in the animal health industry includes veterinary practice, research, product development, business development, and academia. Dr. Jensen was head of the Department of Clinical Sciences in the College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences at CSU from 2016 to 2023. Is currently a faculty member in the department. In 1999, Dr. Jensen and his wife Tracy, also a veterinarian, founded the Wellington Veterinary Hospital, a small animal veterinary hospital that was selected as the 2012 Practice of the Year by the American Animal Hospital Association, and they sold that practice in 2020. And then our third speaker will be Allie Michelson. Allie is the Senior Director of Advocacy and Education for the Dumb Friends League. She formerly held the role of State Director at the ASPCA, Colorado State Director at the ASPCA, where she led the ASPCA's policy and advocacy work in the Mountain West region. Allie has more than a decade of legislative experience and has been involved in the passage of several laws that improve the lives of animals, including preventing suffering in shelters and rescues, repealing breed-specific legislation, and updating animal cruelty laws. And this year also helping us to get the updated spay-neuter bill passed. Prior to her time at Dumb Friends League, Allie worked in tax and budget policy, where she successfully developed and passed legislation to increase school funding, support working families, and increase transparency and fairness in the tax code. Allie has a JD and LLM in taxation from the University of Denver's Sturm College of Law. And in her free time, she enjoys spending time outdoors with her husband, son, and twin daughters. She's also the parent of 2 dogs, a fish, and a bunny. As her 8-year-old son likes to say, her house has 9 hearts. So let me welcome Allie, April, and Wayne.
Hi, everyone. I feel like I know so many of you, and I've started with a few new faces too, so it's really exciting to get to have this conversation. I know that a lot of you have been really deep in this conversation for a couple of years along with the ride with us, and some of you are new to the conversation. So we really hope that we can answer your questions, help you understand where we're coming from, help you understand that there are a couple sides to these issues, and feel like you're well prepared to move forward with either advocating or thinking about this work in a different way. So today we're going to have, as you can see, there's a roadmap because the agenda is boring. So apparently there's a roadmap. And we're going to talk a little bit about the idea of a VPA. And then Allie's going to talk about some telemedicine. We're going to talk about the legislative process, what we have done from here up until this point, and then about some ballot measures that are going to be, you're going to hear a lot about. And then how to get involved if you want to get involved. So hopefully it'll be a good day. And like Judy said, and thank you, Judy, you did a great job with that. We will have questions at the end of this presentation. So we'll allow plenty of time for that. All right, so the first question is there a shortage of veterinarians? And if I ask the people in this room, I think a lot of people would say, yes, we've experienced a shortage of veterinarians. It's interesting that there's a lot of data up here, and I'm not going to read it to you, but this is mainly data by Dr. Jim Lloyd, who did this for the Mars Veterinary Health Group. And he estimated that without making some changes, 75 million cats and dogs are going to go without care in the next, but by 2030 was when he did a study. That's pretty terrifying. And if we're really looking at suffering and trying to prevent suffering of animals, we know that there's no greater risk to that than than the shortage of veterinarians. We also know that the AVMA disagrees, and they put out a shortage paper that says we have an oversupply of veterinarians, and we're gonna have a greater oversupply as new veterinary schools get online. So it's been a super interesting conversation to watch and go back and forth. I think the reality of what we're feeling on the ground is that we don't have enough veterinarians to do the work that we need. Just last week, the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges did a paper that is fascinating. And the first thing they did is they looked at the AVMA's paper and they looked at Dr. Lloyd's paper, and they really dogged both of them. They both said like there's a lot of good things, but this is the shortcoming here, this is the shortcoming here, and they're both probably a little bit wrong. And then they did their own assessment of it, trying to have a neutral point of view. And they say there's going to be a shortage of 27,000 veterinarians by 2032. So that agreed with the experience of having a shortage. So it's taking over 10 months to fill a lot of veterinary positions. So the Dump Frenzy recruiter, Sarah's in the back. She can tell you how hard it is. I'm sure many of you have that same experience too. And there are a lot of open positions right now. So just wanted to make a comment on the general sense that there's a significant shortage. The interesting thing about the 27,000 veterinarian shortage in the paper by the AAVMC, that is in addition to 10 new veterinary schools coming on board and all of the expansion of class sizes that's being planned that has been announced for the veterinary schools in the United States, and the foreign veterinarians that are going to be moving to the US that they think will add to the workforce. So it's really important to keep in mind that's in addition. The other thing that's really interesting to that number is this is an economic study. So this is looking at the number of veterinarians needed to serve people that can access veterinary care, that can afford veterinary care. It's not looking at the need. And, you know, there's two ways to define demand for veterinary services. One is how much money is being spent on veterinary services, who's showing up at the veterinary hospital. And the other is how many sick and injured animals are there that need care from a veterinarian. From an animal welfare point of view, the sick and injured animals that need care is what we use as the demand. But in this study, and Dr. Lloyd's kind of tried to get a little bit to that underserved community, but the AABMC paper and the ADMA paper are all economic studies looking at who's already showing up. We could take a step back from all of this minutia and just look at two big numbers. One is that there are about enough veterinarians in companion animal medicine in the United States to serve 75 million cats and dogs. We have about 145 million cats and dogs in the US. So if we look at it just from that perspective, and we really are serious about all the access to care programs that we're trying to create and prevent the suffering, we know that we're kind of building highways to nowhere if we don't create a better resource for these animals that need our help. So that's it. I think everyone knows there's a shortage of veterinary technicians too. I don't think anyone's arguing this point. It's pretty well agreed upon that we need a lot more veterinary technicians. And right now, at the current rate, and this was done before some of the schools started having decreased graduation class levels, but at the current rate, it would take 30 years to meet the need we have in 10. So it is a real big challenge. We do need to use our veterinary technicians better. We need to make sure they're working at the very top of their degrees, and we need to retain them. That's huge for what we for this issue. We also believe that we need to have a career path for them. It's hard for a veterinary technician to raise a family on a veterinary technician salary. Do we need to increase salary? Yes, we need to increase veterinary technician salary. Will we be able to increase them to the point where they can comfortably raise a family? If they're depending on how much revenue they can generate for a practice, and that's what it's going to come down to. So the veterinary professional associate that we're going to talk about in a minute is something that is potential career path for those veterinary technicians to be able to go back to school and then be able to do work that is actually generating more revenue than they can as a technician. 35% of all tech burn out, have to leave the profession in 5 years. It's just unsustainable for them. And they usually go, in my experience, when I was in practice, my technicians, when they left, they would go to nursing school or ultrasound school, stay in the medical field, but they had to leave their passion of animals. And that was sad because they had such a passion for animals, and we should be keeping those people up. So we also know that pet owners are struggling to access veterinary care. I think it's not a surprise. CSU did a study this last year, kind of looking at pet owners and what their experiences are. And you can see up here with the statistics that many have not been able to access veterinary care. Sometimes they haven't been able to afford it. Sometimes they haven't been able to get an appointment to get in. And that's like 50%. There were no available appointments at a nearby clinic. That is not a great way to serve a society. And those are people that can afford care. And then some cannot, 28% cannot afford it. So 72% of veterinarians and technicians reported they had to euthanize an animal for economic reasons, and there would have been a different outcome if the person had funds or if there was an accessible veterinary program. I think, and that's within the last year. There are other data points showing that that's almost a weekly occurrence in many veterinary practices. Mission Veterinary Practices that has about 200 veterinary practices told me last week, and this is hard for me to believe, I don't think this is our reality here, but 2 out of 3 euthanasias they perform are ethnic. And that is just unacceptable. And then people just really don't have the ability to afford an unexpected veterinary bill. So this is, again, if we're going to start serving this group of folks, we need more resources. So there are many ideas. Utilizing veterinary technicians is one of those ideas. It's a have to. These are all yes and ideas. So you're going to hear a couple newer or revamped thoughts today. Veterinary professional associate is one that might be new for some folks, and then telehealth is the other one. And those are really being approached from an access to veterinary care perspective. So the concept that we're looking at is the PA concept in human medicine. And that's why we use professional associate, because those words already mean something to people in our community. Many of us see PAs when we go to get our medical care, and half of human medical visits right now are performed by a mid-level practitioner. So a PA or a nurse practitioner. So this would be a master's degree in veterinary clinical care. This person would work under the supervision of a veterinarian. So this person wouldn't go out and just have their own practice and be able to do whatever they want to do. They will be supervised by a veterinarian and they will be delegated to by that veterinarian. So what we imagine is a real partnership here where veterinarians and their VPAs are a team. The DVM knows what that VPA is qualified to do, knows their practical experience and delegates to them based on that. So we could see things like a dentistry PA that's doing dentistries all day, every day. Can technicians do dentistry? 70% of that perhaps, and they can clean and they can do, now that this new law passed, a single root extraction, but full mouth dentistries with multiple root extractions, no, they can't do that. You can have a PA that's a hospice PA. You can have a PA that is potentially a spay and neuter PA, depending on the situation and the experience, was something that we could all utilize. But this is not something that would be out there on their own, doing their own. There are a bunch of concerns about this concept, and I just want to touch on a few of them because it's good to know the pros and the cons and really understand that a bit. So one, which honestly I should have put it last, is animal welfare, because honestly this is the most offensive concern to me. So we're trying to do this because animals are not getting veterinary care. And one of the messages that's coming out is, oh, animals are going to suffer because these people aren't doctors. They don't have the same experience as a veterinarian. And so animals are going to have bad outcomes. And if we look at what's happened in the human world, there's 1/3 the rate of liability claims for PAs than there are for MDs. They're a different scope of work, but they're being delegated to and monitored by their DVM. And we need to create this access to care. So really increasing access to veterinary care is an animal welfare issue. And for us, it's the solution, not the concern. Accreditation of schools. So how do we know what the schools are teaching and if they're all going to teach the same thing? And is the VPA going to be a VPA here, there, and everywhere? Is that Dr. Seuss? So the programs have been developed. There's a program available at Lincoln Memorial University in Tennessee. And that program is a truncated program. It's only about 35 semester hours and it's done remotely. But that was the first veterinary school that has created a master's degree program. You're going to hear in a minute that Colorado State University is in the process of creating a master's degree in veterinary clinical care. It's a robust program, as you will see as well. 64 credit hours or 63, I'm sure Wayne will correct me, and a two-year program. So there is a national group called the Coalition for the VPA. And the Coalition for the VPA has representatives from veterinary schools, veterinary hospitals, veterinarians, the National Technician Association, and some animal welfare folks. And that national group is working on a bunch of these things. They're working on accreditation of schools and the accreditation process, a national certification and licensing exam, and having learning objectives that will be shared between all of the programs that are being created. So this is something that has a lot of activity and it's super exciting to see happening. All of the national accreditation programs for schools need to have 3 programs regardless of what the profession is, before they're eligible for accreditation. So we do need to get the schools on board. We have LMU, there's also a master's degree, I think it's Michigan, and then we'll have CSU, and then we'll be able to move forward with the accreditation process. The next question we have is liability, and this is a concern by veterinarians. So some veterinarians feel that they don't want to be liable for the work of a VPA that's working under them. And I understand that. I was in practice for almost 18 years and I had the liability, and every veterinarian that practices right now has a liability for their veterinary technicians, and anything they do, they are liable for. Professional liability insurance covers a veterinarian as long as what they delegated or what they're liable for was within the law, within the state and federal law. So if a veterinary technician has been delegated to do a cat neuter, and that's against the State Practice Act, then the veterinarian will not be covered by their most liability insurance policies. The reason that, or one of the many reasons that we think we need to open up our Practice Act to allow a BPA is so that they are then not liable. They're liable, but they will be covered by their liability insurance for anything that they do. Additionally, in human medicine, PAs have 1/4 the rate of liability insurance claims, like I said earlier. So they're not doing the full scope, they're not doing the really technical, difficult surgeries. You're not going to see a really nasty and abdominal exploratory by a PA. We also believe liability is a good thing, right? So if a veterinarian was not being responsible and decided, I'm just going to delegate everything, I don't even want to be there, I'm on vacation, and something bad happened, that would be inappropriate. That would cause animal suffering. And we want there to be some guardrails on that so that liability can provide those guardrails. We also know that there are a couple professional liability insurance companies that want to cover PAs and are already writing policies. So when they exist, they will do that. So they can have their own insurance as well. Impact on business, I'm not going to go in that too deep because a lot of people in this room, you know, we're not really running for-profit veterinary clinics for the most part. But right now, turning away new clients is really not a great business model. And being able to have someone that is on staff and able to bring in more of these new clients and serve more patients is probably a better business model. There are some models that are coming out that really look at the numbers of that and run different scenarios, and they're looking really positive, both impacting veterinarian salaries, technician salaries, and the GPA and the business health. So, and then the other concern is that there'll be a downward pressure on veterinarian salaries because there'll be competition for veterinarians, and you know that may or may not happen. I don't have that crystal ball. Veterinarians have big debt from school and they need to get paid well. So it's not something we want to see happen, but we also know that if a veterinarian is supervising a BPA, that BPA is generating revenue for the practice, and that supervising veterinarian, the modeling shows that they would probably make about 4% more over what they currently make, which would be actually upward pressure on veterinarian salaries. But this is just a supply and demand question about there's this many veterinarians, this many physicians, and this is what you have to pay to get a veterinarian, and how would this impact that? So those are some of the main concerns. So what has to happen before we can do this, before we can get these folks out here to help with this resource in veterinary medicine? One is our State Practice Act. So most of you probably know this. It's our state law that says how veterinary medicine can be performed in Colorado. Almost every state has a veterinary practice act. And our state law says you have to have a doctor of veterinary medicine degree to diagnose, prescribe, initiate treatment, or do surgery. That's the end. Now, after that, it says there's some exceptions. If you're a senior veterinary student under the direct supervision of a veterinarian, you can do these things. If you own your own animals, you can do these things. So technically, shelters could do these things without a veterinarian, although then we get to an animal welfare issue, you could just have anyone do it. So, but you know, that's one of the technicalities. What we are looking for is to say a person with a master's in veterinary clinical care under the direct supervision of a veterinarian can do those things as delegated by the veterinarian. But practice acts have to change. And then veterinary schools have to develop the programs. Once those two things happen, then we can get the accreditation and the testing and all of those things to follow. But these are the two key things that have to happen before we can utilize a BPA in our society and our community. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jensen to talk a little bit about what they're doing at CSU and developing this program and what this program is going to look like. And then I'll come back.
Well, first, thanks everybody for the opportunity, excuse me, to provide that update. Can I get a thumbs up? Can you hear me? Is that okay? Thanks so much. So as an update on what we're doing, this screenshot here is actually part of the system at CSU where they track new programs. And so this on the right-hand column, you can see the lines that are turned green, and then there's a red one. That's where we are in the process. So this was submitted into the CSU's review process in December, and all the green ones are steps that it's cleared. I can actually say I just heard last night that it has been passed on. So the COSURGE chair, and COSURGE stands for the Committee on what is it, scholarship, research, and graduate education. The chair has passed it on to the next, which is the finance chair. So it's moving through the process. We expect to have full approval sometime this summer. So it looks like we'll likely be on the agenda for the UCC's University Curriculum Committee, and we'll likely be on the agenda for the May meeting for that, which then would mean the state board would approve it at the June meeting. So that's our timeline. But I want to back up just a second, talk about this is a Plan B Masters. And for those that might not be familiar with that, the Plan B, the reason we selected that, well, first, a Plan A Masters has a research thesis. A Plan B does not, excuse me, have a research thesis. The Plan B requires a comprehensive final exam. And that's the reason we selected the Plan B, because recognizing, as Dr. Steele, excuse me, indicated, there's no certification agency yet, but we want to make sure that these individuals are competent in their knowledge base, being able to apply that knowledge base. And so we selected the Plan B so that we could use that comprehensive final exam essentially as a certification exam until such time as when a third-party agency or third-party organization would administer that for us. So next slide. Okay, so this is the first 3 semesters of the curriculum. And the first 3 semesters are all delivered online. And I think that this really has some tremendous advantages. And one of which is that, and this won't be true for the initial class that's admitted, but once this program is well underway, we can allow students to not necessarily to have essentially be on a delayed track or a longer term track, so that they might split that first semester into 2 semesters. And so that will open this program up to a lot of people that might otherwise not be able to take 14 credit hours or 13 credit hours because their workload is too heavy. So it'll open it up to perhaps some underrepresented minorities that our profession is very lacking in at this point. So I won't go through the courses here, but I just want to hit a couple of highlights. There's been a lot of discussion about surgical training, and this program was modeled after obviously our DVM program. It's a subset of the material that we teach our DVM students. In surgery, these students will have the same preclinical surgical training as our DVM students get. In dentistry, they're actually going to have a little bit more than what our current DVM students get. As an aside, we're revising the DVM curriculum, so they won't be more than what the new curriculum will deliver, but what our current DVM students get, they'll be getting more. They'll also have the same, they'll go through the same communications training program as our DVM students go through. So in a lot of ways, this mirrors the DVM program. In one way, it doesn't. This is very species specific. This VPA is going to be focused on dogs and cats only. We can't teach all things about all species and do it in 5 semesters. So this is focused on dogs and cats only. And I would like to echo what Dr. Steele mentioned about changes to the Practice Act, because I would love to start on a livestock BPA, and I know that's of less concern to this group, but I would love to be able to have a livestock BPA to help address the shortage of veterinarians in our rural areas. But we need that change to the Practice Act in order to be able to do that. And as soon as that happens, I expect that we will have a separate but similar BPA program for livestock. Okay, next slide. So In the fourth semester, students will be required to come to Fort Collins, and as you can see, it's all about hands-on laboratories, so hands-on technique laboratories. And then at the end of that fourth semester, you'll see the cumulative final exam the students will have to pass in order to be able to complete the fifth semester, and that fifth semester is a clinical internship. So we expect students to select that internship in areas in which they want to practice. So for example, this, as Dr. Steele mentioned, even without a change to the current Practice Act, students would be able to practice to the full extent of their training if they did so in shelters. And so I would expect that a number of students would want to identify shelters that could provide them that clinical internship. And we'll have a process at Colorado State University to vet, no pun intended, the organizations to make sure that they would provide the appropriate training for these students. And then the last comment I will mention is just the total program credits. As Dr. Steele mentioned, I think she said 64, it's actually 65 semester hours. A typical master's is 30. That's the minimum actually, of 30 credit hours for a master's. So as you can see, this is more than twice the amount of effort and schooling as what a typical master's would be. And with that, I will pass it back, but I'm hanging around if there are any questions.
We will, again, we mentioned we'll save questions till the end. We're really trying to save a pretty robust period of time for question answering, because I'm sure you already have a few. I'm going to jump in and talk about another solution. I want to emphasize something April said early on. We are looking at that veterinary shortage and we are saying, yes, and let's do all of these things. Let's put every tool we can in the toolkit to make sure that we can address the veterinary shortage and the number of people who have trouble getting into their vet and the animals that are suffering because of it. So another one of those solutions is expanding veterinary telemedicine. This is a little less new. Colorado already is practicing veterinary telemedicine, but we want to expand it and make it more accessible for everybody. So we already know, how many of you have used telemedicine in your human life? It's not a new concept. So we already know that telemedicine is a safe and convenient way to increase access to care. And we know that it can be a really great way to access populations of people that are not traditionally able to access our veterinary care system. It can alleviate financial and logistical barriers. It can keep more pets in their homes. And it can extend the capacity of animal shelters like ours to serve more people in the community. Thank you. So as we've identified, we are pretty familiar with telemedicine. In human healthcare in all 50 states, everybody is practicing telemedicine, from infants to seniors. Our own children's hospital is a great example. They're kind of known nationally for their work that really launched during COVID, which is also when a lot of our veterinary telemedicine launched. And they actually just opened up a veterinary or an urgent care clinic via telehealth. So they are really finding ways to expand their access. And some of the things that they have said in their research and review of this is it increases health equity, it drives down costs, and it allows them to bring more people into the traditional medical system that aren't already there. So it's reaching into communities that aren't seeing the doctor and bringing them in via telehealth and then getting them into the hospital and being able to treat them. So who would benefit from virtual veterinary care? I'm sure this is pretty obvious to a lot of you because you see these people every single day. It's people who experience barriers to our current system. They don't have a call. They have a very spicy cat who gets very angry in the clinic, and they will bring that cat in, but for everyone's sake, they would prefer not to. People who live in areas where veterinary care is limited. I had a legislator reach out to me and say, we just lost the one vet in our community, so we have to go to Nebraska. Those are people who could benefit from occasional telehealth treatment. It's also people who have senior or ill pets. This is an interesting place for telemedicine that we've been hearing from vets, is that it can be a place that complements end-of-life care and hospice care. So as I mentioned, Colorado already allows veterinary telehealth. There are people practicing veterinary telehealth. There are people loving the veterinary telehealth system. Our current regulations, our current statute says that an animal must be seen and a veterinarian must be recently seen and acquainted with an animal to create a veterinary client-patient relationship. That's what we all fight about, the VCPR. Our rules have been recently amended to say that an in-person visit is required for a VCPR. That is not in our statute yet. We'll get to that. And so when we say we want to expand telehealth, what we want to see is the ability to create the VCPR virtually. That is what we do in human healthcare. We want to model that same successful model in veterinary care. I want to be clear. We are not saying you can only create a VCPR virtually. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is a really complementary way to treat people. And one of the ways that has to be expanded to allow for use in veterinary medicine is by allowing the creation of a virtual VCPR. This year, the legislature passed, hasn't been signed, girls holding out, House Bill 1048. House Bill 1048 puts in the statute that an animal must be seen in person in the clinic before they can receive any care. That is not in our current law. And from our point of view, that does not expand care, that restricts it. That puts a new requirement on veterinary clinics and veterinarians that they did not have, that now restricts the way that they can use veterinary telehealth. One of the things that I struggle with that is it is a mandate. It says you have to do this before you can do that. One of the things I love about the option of expanding telehealth and really the vet PA is we are saying, if this is what suits your practice in your community and your clients, then do this. Expand your veterinary care practice via telehealth. But if you're not comfortable with that, then don't. But we want to make sure and empower veterinarians to use every tool they have to address the needs in their community. And we think that's a really important part of all of these solutions. We've seen other states expanding veterinary telehealth. Prior to last year, a handful of states already explicitly allowed veterinary telehealth, allowed the creation of a veterinary telehealth VCPR. In the last year, California, Arizona, and Florida all passed bills to codify the use of the creation of a VCPR electronically. These were nearly unanimous. These were bipartisan bills that made a lot of sense in each of those communities. And part of it was because they recognize that this is a benefit to expand care without putting any requirements on anyone to how they can practice. It's also been introduced in Michigan. Michigan has a weird session where they like introduce stuff and then they, I don't know, go on spring break for 6 months and get back and stuff. I'm kind of jealous. So it's been introduced there, but it's creeping along. And then, as I mentioned, we kind of went the other way. We added some restrictions to our veterinary telehealth program that we did not have in place before. So similar to April, some of the concerns and solutions that we hear about veterinary telehealth, particularly expanding it to include a virtual VCPR. One is prescribing. One of the things that we have seen states do when it comes to prescribing is put guardrails, and actually this isn't prescribing, this is all of these. You can legislate guardrails into when a virtual VCPR is appropriate. We do trust vets. We believe that they can make those decisions, that your veterinarian is not going to say, get your scalpel out. We're going to do a virtual spay neuter right here. Okay. We trust that to know when telemedicine is appropriate and when it's not. And one of the things that has happened with prescribing is putting guardrails such as must comply with all federal laws. There's a lot of discussion about where the FDA feels and draws lines around prescribing and telemedicine. And one of the ways that we can just make sure that everybody is in compliance is by saying we only prescribe within all federal and state laws. Another thing that we have offered in our expanded version of telemedicine is making it very clear that you cannot prescribe controlled substances via telehealth, as with creation of a virtual VCPR. Another concern we've heard is that you will have, your veterinarian in Oregon treating people here, and that disconnect is going to be harmful to animals. Another guardrail we made really clear in our iteration of this legislation is that it's a Colorado licensed veterinarian treating a Colorado pet. We want people here. We want to keep this medicine locally. And one of the main reasons for that is the next one on here, which is referrals. We want to make sure that a telehealth provider is able to refer to a bricks and mortar Colorado practice. So if they do say, hey, I just addressing this or prescribing and treating this over telehealth, I want you to come see our practice or this practice that I've heard. As I mentioned, we know telehealth is not suitable for all things. This is not a replacement for veterinary medicine in the clinic. It is a complement. What we have seen in healthcare, as I already mentioned, is it allows people who can't access the traditional model all the time to get the care they need some of the time. We are not saying that telehealth is going to take over. Again, you guys will not see me picking up my scalpel at home. But there are a lot of reasons and a lot of situations where telehealth can be really beneficial. And that's why we think it's so important to expand it now. I mean, Judy said 145, and I don't want to brag, but it is 140. So we're going to take a quick break. Everybody go and get more drinks and, I mean, not those drinks, you probably need those, but not those drinks, get some more water and go to the bathroom. And then I think in about 15 minutes, we're going to resume. We're going to do the second part where we talk a little bit more about policy and how we expand access to care via policy. And then we're going to have all that time for questions. Yeah, my voice shakes because I can hear it so loud and it's I'm about to write for it. Absolutely. All right, good afternoon. Started. So if I could get everybody seated, and those of you who are on virtually, get ready to for a short portion from Allie, and then we will get to our questions and answers. So get those questions ready. Again, for those of you who are on virtually, if you want to put a question in the chat, you can, or you can also wait until the end. So Allie, take it away. We're back. So one of the other parts you might have noticed about this AWAC reading or gathering is the advocacy piece. So we wanted to take a little minute to talk about something you may have already heard about or something that may be a little bit more foreign to you because you only did it in 7th grade civics, is talk a little bit about how a bill becomes a law in Colorado and then how that has led to the ballot process and what that looks like. So I'm going to kind of go through this on a really 10,000-foot level, but you know, take questions on this too, because I'm always happy to talk about this as well. So I'm going to use our spay-neuter bill that we talked about. This was an AWAC bill as an example. The way the spay-neuter bill came about, for those of you who aren't part of the advocacy committee, is we had a number of members from the advocacy committee mentioning the fact that we've seen a big increase in intact dogs coming into shelters and being imported into the state and then being adopted out without being spayed and neutered. So we met for a year and we talked about this. It was members, colleagues, all of you, CVMA and PACFA, and maybe Colorado Voters for Animals, a few other animal welfare organizations And we went through kind of a big process to decide what made sense from a policy standpoint. What issue could we address at the legislature? What law could we change to make this a better policy solution? And what we decided was to close a loophole, as we are calling it, for allowing spay and neuter exemptions for the health of a dog or cat. So you can still get a spay neuter exemption if it jeopardizes the life of a dog or cat, but we took out health because we saw that health is the #1 thing that people were using to say, we don't need spay neuter. This, could jeopardize the life or the health of this dog in 10 years, or because they're we all have so many purebred show dogs that come through because there are purebred show dogs. So that was the bill idea that we came up with. We went and we found some sponsors. So sponsors are our legislators who are really excited about carrying the idea. They may not have known what the heck we were talking about, but they understand spay neuter, which is why one of them in committee called it the Bob Barker bill, of course. So we found some wonderful bipartisan sponsors, and our bill was introduced. So that means they read it, they introduce it to the both chambers, or to our current chamber, the Senate, and the bill starts the process. Our bill was introduced early in January, and then it's assigned to committee. So the first reading by the clerk, this is the introduction, then it's assigned to committee. For our bills, most of our bills go to the Ag Committee, the Agricultural Committee. This was no exception. And so that is where we go and we all share why this is important policy with the legislators. That is when we have our hearing and we testify, and we share with them why this is important for our community. They have an opportunity to ask questions, and then they do the first vote. We had a wonderful committee hearing, and the bill passed to that committee unanimously. Yay. I'm going to say all these things, and just so you know, things like unanimous, not regular in your vocabulary, but this year we were just we had some really great sponsors and great policies that we worked with. So once the bill goes through committees, it goes to the whole chamber. So in this case, it was the Senate. The whole Senate will take a vote on the bill. Assuming it passes that chamber, then it's wash, rinse, repeat. You go to the other chamber. In our case, that was the House. I'm sorry, they vote twice. I should say that they vote once by voice vote. Yay, I vote yes. And then they do a recording. Then it moves to the other chamber, which in our case was the House. Again, we went to the House Ag Committee. They passed it, and then it was voted on in the House chamber. 2 votes, the 18 vote, and then a recorded vote. One of the things that happened with spay neuter is we made an amendment in the House. So we had to go back to the Senate, and the Senate has to say, yeah, that's cool. We're okay with your amendment. That's called a conference committee if they don't concur. And so they concurred with us. And then that bill went to the governor. And as Judy said, the bill was signed by the governor a couple weeks ago. We really wanted to have a in-person signing and do a big like spur while somebody's in the background, like tying up. Doing spay neuter. You guys know how much I know about veterinary medicine. But we didn't do that. He just signed it in his office. But now that is the law. It will become effective depending on the effective date of the bill and when it is signed, usually at the latest by January next year. That was kind of the process we went through. And that is how all the bills go through. Ours was pretty quick, but this can take 120 days of the session. And that's how long this session is. So sometimes you have to go to multiple committees. We were lucky, we just went to Ag, but we had a fiscal note. So if we would have cost a bunch of money to change this law, we would have had to go to the Finance Committee, we would have had to talk to the Budget Committee, all of that. So it's a confusing process, but it's actually pretty accessible. And there is a lot of great opportunities for everybody to get involved and participate. Thank you to those who have come and testified with us or reached out to legislators. The main times for that are those committee hearings, and we can go and have those conversations with legislators. And so we, as the advocacy committee, will continue to share those opportunities because we love to have people come and share their voice. And you are the experts, so your voice is the one that is really heard and really matters. So one of the things, going back to the whole topic at hand, is most statutory changes. This is all the legislature can do is changes to statute. They cannot change the Constitution. That has to be voted on by Coloradans. But they can change statutes. So if we're going to talk about the Veterinary Practice Act, we usually would address that at the legislature. That is a statutory change. Unfortunately, we have been working with the legislature for about 4 years, and we just haven't been able to do really right. We just have not had our voices heard in that discussion. That would be the way that we would choose to make these policy changes. That is the way other states do it. That is a place where organizations come together and stakeholder and negotiate and all of that. We just haven't had that as part of our experience with these two policies. So we also know that the majority of Coloradans are still suffering. They're still having trouble accessing the vet, and this problem isn't going away. Which leads us to the ballot measures. I'm gonna hand it over to April.
Oh, I get to talk about.
Sorry. They don't want to hear from me anymore.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so ballot measures are a huge process that I'm learning more than I ever wanted to know about. But it's very interesting and fascinating too. As Ally said, we really did try for years to do this legislatively, and we actually had, I just want to back up 1 second, we had bipartisan support, which means a Democrat and a Republican in both the House and the Senate sponsoring a BPA bill. And it was blocked from being introduced, even though it was a top 5 bill, which is really unheard of. So we finally realized we're banging our heads against the wall. There is a strong, there's a veterinarian who's a great person and a great legislature, but she is very against BPA and she's not on the list. So we determined we are going to use our efforts in a place that we can actually make change. And those are with 2 ballot makers. So the ballot measure process is super interesting. I don't know what my next slide looks like. Yeah. So first of all, we have to say, what do we want it to say? What is the law that we wanted to create? And then we bring it to the title board and we say, we want the title to be this. And the title is really important because the title is what is going to be on the ballot when people go to vote. And this is taking this policy to pet owners across the state and letting them decide if they want to see this and have this access. So we went and you take your policy to the board, you hire a lawyer, they go to the board has a Secretary of State person on it, Attorney General's office, and what's the third one?
Legislative Council,
Legislative
Legal
Legal
Services.
Services. So 3 people, it's this 3-person panel, and they say, yeah, your title makes sense, or no, it's not complete, or let's write this into the title, and we think it should say this. And then they award you a title. And once you have your title, then there's a week long that anybody who opposes this policy, doesn't want to see it happen, or doesn't think the title is fair, or doesn't explain what's in the real bill, or if it's more than one subject, because you can only have one subject in a ballot measure, you can't throw a bunch of stuff in there and say it's one ballot measure. They can file an opposition and then go to a rehearing. So the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association filed an opposition to our title, and we went to a rehearing a subsequent week later. Our lawyer and their lawyer all presented, and the title board basically throughout their challenge changed one word in one title. Throughout the rest of the challenge said this is good to go, and you are awarded your title. So it can be no more opposition at the title board level. Now, there is one more place that there can be opposition that can be appealed to the Colorado Supreme Court. And that process is happening. The CVMA is appealing that to the Colorado Supreme Court. That process rarely overturns a ballot title because the board has, this is what they do. They know if it's a legitimate title, if it's single subject. The Supreme Court would not be speaking to whether it's a good policy or a bad policy. That's not what they comment on. They're just commenting on if the title represents the policy that is in the bill and if it's a single subject. So that's out there pending, and it's kind of in the background, and we're moving forward with the next step. So the next step, well, first of all, here are the 2 initiatives. So initiative 144, I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it yourself. But it basically says you can establish a veterinarian client-patient relationship through audiovisual communication. So you don't have to have an in-person exam before you get seen now, or you can get care through telemedicine. As you heard Ally talk about, there was a bill passed this year that says you have to have an in-person exam. This would supersede that because it would be policy that was passed later. And so then that would not go into effect. This would go into effect if this gets on the ballot.
I have to point out too, this is their simple version. They are tasked with writing a very simple title. This is their simple version. So
Yeah.
you should see how it starts.
And they want to do a title that anybody can understand that's going to vote on the measure, so they know what the policies are. The second initiative is 145, and we've been told that these numbers may change when they're actually on the ballot, but these are the initiatives as of right now. And this basically says that someone with a master's degree in veterinary clinical care can work under the direction of a veterinarian and practice veterinary medicine, and that there will be some guardrails around this. So those are the two titles that are going to be hopefully on the November ballot for people to vote on. Oh, so our polling, this was polling, it was funded by the ASPCA and the league. We've split it. And it's a heating research company. There's a lot of polling for all different political things in Colorado. And it was, they were blown away by these results that 84%, when we did a plain language description of what we're looking at, 84% of people supported that for the VPA and 86% for the telehealth language. Not only that, but 7 or 8% were in opposition, and they've never seen numbers that low in opposition when they're in with the polling that they've done. So this is super exciting. It makes us feel like once we get it on the ballot, it will pass. Getting it on the ballot is a challenge. So it's not a done deal by any means.
Yeah. I'll also add, this is a sampling of across the state. And they found that, like many animal issues, this is nonpartisan or bipartisan. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter your income group. Everybody feels really strongly about expanding access to care. And this was a really great indicator to us, because we are hearing so many different things about the veterinary shortage from different sources. And when we have this many people saying, please expand the access to veterinary care, of course I support that. It was good to see as an indicator that we're going in the right direction.
So this is the easy step. No, this is the really hard step. We have to obtain over 124,000 valid signatures by Colorado voters for each initiative. So when we say valid, that means they're Colorado voters, their signature matches what their driver's license signature basically, and that we have no duplicates. People aren't so excited about it; they sign it every time they see it. It's not a good thing. That's what. If a lot of initiatives, people pay people to signature gather, especially when they're initiatives that are really not bipartisan or are real controversial. And that can cost, I mean, 1445 a signature is probably the lowest end of what we've researched. It can cost $5-6 million for something. So we're like, nope, we can't do that. That's not going to be an option. I do want to comment on that too, that there's this narrative that some people are hearing that big corporate veterinary practices are behind this and are funding this. We've not received a dollar from a corporate veterinary practice. This is all animal welfare groups doing this work. So that's another reason why this is completely out of the picture. So we need volunteer signature gatherers. This is going to be a huge campaign. We're going to have, field leads in different communities that are going to help train people and get the petitions to them. And we're going to notarize them and get them back. And we're going to try to really do most of this through a grassroots volunteer campaign, which we're super excited about. It's still going to cost a lot of money. We have to validate those signatures still. We have to hire the field directors. We have to print the ballots, which are booklets. So that's expensive. So there's going to be a lot of money spent there, but this is the way we can get this policy moving and access to veterinary care created.
I think I was just going to add, because I always have to add, I guess, that that one of the things that makes a volunteer signature gathering effort sort of special in my mind is you don't lose anything by telling the community what we're doing, by talking about opportunities to expand vet care, by asking them to be engaged. Even if we don't make it all the way to the ballot, which we're gonna, don't get me wrong, but we are investing in the community's knowledge and education on this by sharing this information, by asking voters to understand what's going on. And so I think there's this idea that like, it's crazy to invest money in a ballot measure, but it's not just investing money to put something on a ballot. It's investing in education. It's investing in awareness, outreach, and all of those things. And I think when it comes to the veterinary shortage, that benefits all of us, no matter how you feel about these two particular solutions. The more people who know what our struggles are, the more people are going to be engaged in our solutions.
And because of those, we want your help. Anybody who wants to help, we welcome. We're gonna have training sessions across the state, or at least along the Front Range. We need people that will sign, that will take petitions out, get them signed, host events, all the things you see up here. If we had 1,000 people collecting signatures, this would be easy. If we had 10 people, it's not going to be very easy. So we are going to do a big kickoff event when
April 4th.
April
At the
4th.
League.
At the League, a huge kickoff event, a party. We're going to have some training. We're going to have a petition so people can take them and start getting signatures. And we're really excited and terrified about it. I think that's it for me, right?
We're ready
Yep,
for questions?
we're ready for the big part.
I gotta stay just sharing.
All right, yes, you have to stay and Wayne, I haven't seen questions up there for you yet, but so if we can, so the first question is the CACVT, the Colorado Association of Certified Veterinary Technicians, has put out a statement there against VPAs. Knowing this, wouldn't it be better to expand the veterinary tech specialist programs and responsibilities to address the issues you've presented? Who wants to? I'll start.
I do have a comment about that. If you don't
Okay,
mind.
Wayne, let's go ahead and take that one.
Yeah, so I mean, as part of the program proposal, we're required to identify what are potential applicants. Where's the applicant pool going to come from? And while I completely agree with the comment about, and that's me agreeing as a veterinarian, not as CSU, I agree with the comment about we should do more to advance the veterinary technician specialties, but that doesn't grow our profession because it's not adding new individuals into the profession. So the applicant pool that we've identified that we believe is substantial is individuals who have already done all the prerequisites for veterinary school, but they don't get in. And so they've satisfied the prerequisites for our program, but they can't get into veterinary school. And we know that there's a large number of qualified candidates in those pools that would be great candidates for the VPA programs.
And then I'll add to that too. So a couple thoughts. One is 2% of veterinary technicians-ish in Colorado are VTSs. VTS is a specialization that veterinary technicians can get. It takes an average of 5 years to get that accredited, that specialization. So it's a long process and it's very self-motivated, and that works great for certain learning styles, but it's another alternative to someone that wants to have a structured style to get to a VPA level. The other thing is the National Association of Veterinary Technicians, or NAVTA. They did a survey of veterinary technicians across the United States, and technicians said, we want title protection, we want to be better utilized, we have these priorities. They never said they did not want a VPA. Actually, they had overwhelming response that they do want to see a VPA happen. It's just not their top 4 priorities this year. And then I actually heard similar things from CACVT. I don't know if Erin Henninger's on the call or not, but maybe she could comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a position statement against VPA?
Yeah, we released one last year.
Okay.
In our website.
Yeah.
So you can use it.
And we have been reached out to by many veterinary technicians that are in very strong support of this. So the association is representing a strong voice as well, but we are hearing from both sides of that.
Okay. Second question from the virtual audience, and then I'll take some questions from our in-person audience. So second, as someone who has no experience with telehealth appointments, how do telehealth appointments address routine information gathering such as TPR and weights? Isn't this information important to know to be able to accurately assess needed care? I'm also wondering how these type of appointments would fit into potential cruelty and neglect cases when a hands-on assessment can provide crucial evidence. So April, do you want to take a little bit of how do telehealth appointments work? Getting things like TPR and weights, and then
Yeah, and I wish we had one of our telehealth doctors here, because it's amazing what they are doing right now. So a couple things, weights are pretty straightforward. You can weigh yourself, pick up your animal, weigh it, see the difference. Temperatures, if you have, some people actually can take their pets' temperatures. I know some telehealth veterinarians do get that done quite regularly, especially now that there's infrared thermometers and things like that. But pulse, it just depends on the person. They do have stethoscopes now that can actually, and there's all kinds of technology that can help to this, right? So it depends how they're doing that and if they have access to it, but there's ways that they can get a lot of this information. Cruelty cases would not be a good situation for telehealth in general. However, having said that, one thing that you do gain from telehealth that you don't get when someone brings an animal into your hospital is you can see the environment that the animal is in. So there have been situations where people have done a telehealth appointment and seen something like, piles of feces in the background on the floor or whatever that looks like, that then trigger them to do a welfare check or a response that they would not have known if the animal came into the hospital.
sure.
I've seen, I've seen this with some of the human healthcare. And if you go to like children's, I have a bunch of kids, and so they're always sick. And they give you a list, like this is kind of your ideal list of things we would like you to have so we can do an assessment over the computer. We would love for you to have a scale or tell us how much your child weighs. We'd love for you to have a thermometer. We would love for you to have all of those things. But it's not a barrier. Not everybody has all of those things. And so one of the great things about expanding telemedicine is it gives us an opportunity, like we've seen in healthcare, to figure out how to be the most efficient and effective we can be using both telehealth and in-clinic visits.
Yeah. And if a fever is going to dictate your treatment option and your prognosis, then that would be a situation where you would say we need to come in and get it.
All right. Questions from our in-person audience?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So obviously, the biggest concern with retaining veterinary technicians is their lack of compensation for the job that they do. And my concern is that if we're expecting them to stay in the field, we're not going to give them a living wage. How do you expect them to stay in the field?
Okay.
The option is to go and get a $30,000 degree, possibly streamline their career and make them more money. How are they going to afford?
So just for those folks who are on virtually, could you hear Aaron's question? Wayne, could you hear Aaron's question? Okay. So I'm going to repeat as best I can. If one of our goals is to retain veterinary technicians, and we're already struggling to pay our veterinary technicians a living wage, and the master's degree is potentially a $30,000 ish degree, how are we expecting them to be able to afford that at the salaries, essentially at the salaries we're paying for veterinary technicians? Did I? So, and maybe can I also ask them to address how within a practice, the use of a VPA might be able to raise everybody's salaries? Is that it?
A veterinary technician salary.
So yes. You
want me to start answering?
Yeah, start answering, April, and then Wayne, you can type in too.
All right, so it's not a $35,000 degree. It's going to cost more. Veterinary technician degree is probably $35,000, depending on where you go. So what the plan is that it's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio, which is what is used to determine if it's a viable degree, if it's a very accessible degree, and if what you make when you graduate will be able to have you pay off your student loans, because that's how they're going to be able to afford this, and have a living. And so 1-to-1 ratio is what we're seeking. We're not there yet in veterinary medicine. Veterinary school costs more on average with debt than we are on first year salaries. But the cost of the program and the first year salary being a 1-to-1 ratio is a goal. And that is the intention of the program at CSU and what we're looking at. It will be student loans to get there. The thing about paying technicians is, yes, we have to pay them a livable wage. And I'm seeing technicians, thankfully, finally, consistently getting paid more and more. I've seen those technician rates go, or the hourly rates for technicians go up quite a bit, especially since RVTs were registered. But if a practice is turning away clients, they are not making the profit they need to increase those dollars for those technicians. You cannot pay people more if you don't have more money that the business is generating. So as the business is able to generate more money, and then we're talking private practices right now, because I think that's probably what you're most interested in this conversation. If you have a veterinarian that say makes 22% of their production, which is pretty typical in private practice, you hire a BPA that's making 17% of production. That supervising veterinarian that has some extra duties to supervise that BPA can make 5%, which is another $25,000 a year in a veterinary salary. The practice makes about 20% on that additional revenue, which now is a pool of money that they can use to pay their technicians better. So one feeds the other very, very clearly. And there are models that show that this happens. And what is not really possible is to say, how is a practice going to just start paying a technician more if nothing changes? And that's what we're trying to address. Jen?
I'd like to just add on to it, because I think some of the concerns that we've definitely talked about, that's the text with this, is that if you look at the proposed duties of what this BPA would do, and the list that you had on your slide, it's like 60 to 80% of this technicians are doing, and I should say technicians are capable of doing. There's definitely practices that are not the technicians do that. And so that's absolutely a place that needs to grow and change. So I think where we're concerned is that technicians are already doing a vast majority of this work, and they're already underpaid. And we're going to bring in a BPA that's going to do a lot of jobs that technicians are already doing and capable of doing. And their salary is going to be potentially close to double of what technicians are making. And I think that disconnect is really what's bothersome, because we're seeing how much of practice, and even in shelter medicine, I think we're one of the best places that show technicians and their full capabilities. And what we see is we're doing this, and technicians, we need to keep doing that, do it more. And there's this, I think, this room there where if technicians are the focus, and I know you're saying is it and this, but I think that we recognize expanding the scope of technicians, recognizing they're already doing the majority of this list, that's the key to having technicians be able to keep their career and have a livable wage. But we have to be able to show why their pay is low and how the different roles that are going to expand, thanks to the bill, the House Bill 1047, how those things are going to help them grow without having to go be a master's. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so I just want to, just for the audience, or for the virtual audience,
Sorry, yes.
and and Jen, I'm not going to get all of it.
Yes, fair enough.
So if I get this correctly, one of the concerns that is coming up is that of the things that we're saying a VTA could do, technicians have the ability to do a significant portion of those things. I hope everybody, both in this room and on this call, recognizes that in shelters, from what I'm hearing from our technicians, what I'm hearing from veterinarians, we do an amazing job of using our technicians.
They heard Jen.
Oh, they heard Jen. Perfect. Got it. Then you heard Jen. I won't repeat it. So go ahead.
True foundational misunderstanding here. If you look at a list, you say, oh, technicians can do 70 or 80% of this. Technicians, for our Practice Act right now, cannot diagnose, cannot prescribe, cannot initiate treatment, cannot do surgery. What CSU was looking at training BPAs to do, 95% is those 4 things. So there's a foundational issue. If you think that the BPAs are gonna be doing what the technicians are doing, that's not how we're envisioning this at all. We're envisioning the technicians doing expanded technician work and hopefully more and more revenue generating work, because that's how technicians are gonna get paid better. So technicians doing recheck appointments, doing single root extractions, whatever we can do. But there's still a really hard line in our state statute that technicians cannot diagnose, prescribe, initiate treatment, or do surgery. And those are the things that the vast majority of the work that the VPAs are going to do. That's what the curriculum is also directed at doing. Wayne, did you have anything to add to that?
No, you're spot on, and I'm not sure where that 60 to 80% number came from, because it's not accurate. These individuals are not trained to be technicians.
I think it's just the listing that was on the slide. So team manager, yeah. Here, routine surgery, obviously that's not technician, dentistry,
Leslie, can I ask you a question?
yes.
I am not a vet or a vet tech. I tried. I went to vet school. I threw up in my very first time seeing a dog open. And went to law school. But one of the things that's been happening to me is I've been part of this conversation for 4 years. And I've heard that all we need to do is expand the use of vet techs, pay them more, get more VTS in this field. And I feel like if that were really the only solution, we would do it. And I guess that's where I'm struggling, is I know there's a lot of resistance and this is a new position, and that is a big, big fundamental shift. But what I haven't seen is that come to fruition. If that is the solution, why are we doing it?
I pay my technicians $35 to $40.
Why isn't everyone else doing it?
That's a great question.
I'm just curious. I hear this so much, and it seems like that's something everyone agrees on. And then we don't do it.
That's because most clinics are owned by a corporation. So they're not thinking about the fact that they need to pay their staff.
I think one, that means they keep their staff, even if it means they're reducing the rate of turnover. I mean, I had a tax and budget background, and I know that's part of business. So I'm just curious.
It's taking a step.
Prescribed and diagnosing.
Yeah.
So that's the thing.
And taking a step back, I think we need to really remember something that we talked about earlier, which is this is an access to care issue. We have millions of animals that are not getting care. We have a bigger shortage of veterinary technicians than we have a veterinarian. So yes, please do everything you can to respect your veterinary technicians, to pay your veterinary technicians, to expand their scope of work and use them to the highest level of their degrees. And there's a massive shortage that we're not addressing, that is not going to fill that void.
Okay. Yeah, so Janae, and then I wanna.
Okay.
We're gonna.
Well, I just kind of wanted to piggyback off of Katie's question, because I feel like she was addressing an issue that didn't quite get answered. That also I have a concern about, and I support telehealth 100%. However, have we thought about any unintended consequences with cruelty cases? So say an officer goes out and says, you need to take your animal to the vet, and they go get telehealth medicine and say, here's my telehealth report. And we say, well, that's not adequate. We write them a ticket, it goes to court, and the judge says they went to telehealth.
Yeah, so hopefully they heard the question.
They did.
Okay, good. So a couple things on that. It is up to the veterinarian to understand when they can and cannot make a diagnosis on telehealth. If a veterinarian is making a diagnosis on a cruelty case and saying, this is fine, there's nothing wrong with it, when there was something that was so obvious that there was a summons or a mandate to go see a veterinarian, then that veterinarian is going to be liable for that. That's where that connection is. But if a veterinarian says, I don't know what the typical things that are getting underweight, probably
Yeah.
old
exactly.
injuries.
That's why I think
Yeah.
that she addressed the weight issue, or
Yeah.
hooves, or
Yeah.
teeth, or, something metabolic might be going on with the animal.
Right.
And
Yeah.
You know, and we get a lot of resistance from vets that are like, oh, no, it'll be okay.
Yeah,
And it's
even
like,
in person sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And the thing is, I wouldn't. When this was at the legislature, we had some of the CVMA veterinarians come in and say, hey, I had the situation where if I'd used telehealth, this animal would have died. Well, yeah, there's a lot of those situations. We're not saying that a trauma surgeon at a hospital should use telehealth, right? But there are a lot of situations where it really can save a life as well. You know, an animal ingests rat poisoning, can't get into the hospital, has no transportation. Wow, we could save that animal's life right then using telehealth. So it's knowing that it's not appropriate for all situations. And that one, it would be the veterinarian's license that would be on the line.
I agree. I just wanted to
Yeah.
throw it out there because that is a concern. that
Yeah.
If somehow this went to court,
They said, we saw that.
yeah,
Yep.
and the judge was like, sure, they did. Just something to think about.
Okay, so back to our virtual questions. You have polling data regarding veterinary support for the ballot initiative. I'm guessing that's the VPA ballot initiative.
So we have polling data that we did not do, we have access to, that Colorado State University and the governor's office did together in January. And it did not ask about the ballot measure, but it asked about BPA and it asked about telehealth. And there was actually so a lot more support than we thought there would be. 40% of veterinarians, even in the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association survey, said that they would hire a BPA or consider hiring a BPA. It would take a decade to graduate that many BPAs. So what we're trying to do is create something that the people that are invested and think this is a good idea and want to do it have the opportunity to do it. And people that think this is the worst idea ever, it terrifies me, I don't want the liability, don't have to.
I think on those surveys, just so that everyone's aware, when surveys asked about a PA, what's interesting about it is everyone has like an idea of what a PA is, right? Because we have it in humane healthcare. And so a lot of people answer is like, yeah, I want a PA. This sounds great. Like I use one myself. I think it'd be awesome. And then when you start informing people about what the proposed veterinary PA would be, and especially this issue of surgery is coming up on a question here soon, this idea of performing surgery, I've talked to a lot of people like, oh, wait a second, time out. PAs don't do surgery. I'm not sure I would be for that. And so we definitely become aware that on these surveys, when we just ask people about a PA, it's a little bit hard to fully understand what people are interpreting.
He's just saying it
because everybody has their own, like image of what that would be. And those surveys aren't necessarily explaining what is the proposal from the CSU program. So I think this question about the surveys is a lot of other like primary concerns from veterinarians. I know you all.
Wayne, do you want to address that question around the survey and recognizing that when the term VPA is thrown out, that different people can have different associations and ideas of what that means and kind of what your program is really designed to do? And I'm hearing particular concern around the surgery question.
Yeah.
So first off, even though I'm at CSU, I wasn't part of that survey that was done actually in a different college. Even it wasn't done in the vet med college. So I have seen the results, but not as a CSU representative, but as a veterinarian, I'd like to address the question, and that's just because the BPA is going to work under the supervision of the veterinarian. The veterinarian is the quality control check. They're not going to delegate something that they don't, or that they're not confident that this individual is competent in performing. Again, to Dr. Steele's point, and I agree with it, it's good that they have some liability there. So it puts those safeguards around that. And I would also add, I recently read that the state of California is considering veterinary technicians to neuter cats, and they have no surgical training. So, we're at least providing these individuals with the same pre-surgical training or preclinical training in surgery as what our DVM students receive. So they will be trained. They're going to need some on-the-job training. That's the point about the clinical internships. But I believe that we can provide them the basis upon which, with practice, no pun intended there, but under supervision, that they will be very competent to perform routine minor surgeries. Yeah.
I think also, this is a funny thing about data and surveys is when it doesn't come out the way you want, it's like, well, I don't know about this. And so we've seen a lot of people where it goes the other way. They don't like a vet PA and then they hear more about it and they're like, okay, now I actually understand and I am in favor. And so it was exciting when we saw that survey came back showing a lot of people in favor, majority of veterinary professionals in favor of virtual VCPR. And more in favor of a vet PA than not, because we were not expecting that necessarily, because we do get a lot of feedback from some of our shelter vets. And this was a much broader survey. This was not an insular one. This was really went out to the community.
Yep, and what's also interesting, and I want to back up to the legislative process, we tried in our legislative process to actually address, and we said, let's put a guardrail here that says a surgery outside of an abdominal cavity. So it could be a neuter, it could be a mass removal, it could be something like that. And because we were blocked in the legislature, that is no longer in the language of the ballot measure. However, what is in the language of the ballot measure is that the State Board of Veterinary Medicine gets to create rules around this. And that's where the guardrails could come into place, but it won't be in statute anymore because we had to go a different route.
Okay. So then the question, aren't the trade associations better?
It looks like one person has asked most of these questions. Do we want to try to jump to
Yeah,
some new voices?
okay.
I think this is her first question.
Got it.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. Aren't the trade associations better equipped to understand possible unintended consequences to VPAs rather than the general voters? April or Wayne, who wants to?
Well, again, I'm not going to answer this question because at CSU, we're building a program. But as a veterinarian, I would say that the trade associations have actually not even acknowledged that we have an access to care issue. I mean, they've actually come out and said there is no access to care issue. There is no shortage of veterinarians. And when all the data says, most of the data says otherwise. For my personal opinion, the trade associations are being very trade protectionistic and not addressing societal needs. And it's not the first time in history that this has happened, but always in history, eventually societal needs are going to win out. It's just, what does it come from within our profession or is it imposed upon us from the outside?
Yeah, that's a less spicy but more appropriate answer. Thank you.
All right. Questions in the audience? Yes.
So I'm starting by vet tech. I'm also a terrible public speaker, so bear with me.
You're fine.
I think, from the technician perspective, I can be much more supportive of the VPA. If there was an opportunity to have brought forward for technicians that could involve an undergrad and a master's, that, maybe if it was, going to vet tech school and some years of experience in some ways and path forward for technicians, because we've all worked with a lot of great technicians that go straight from high school to vet tech school, and they're amazing and they're smart. And they're not going to take the time on our salary and our life to go get an undergrad, to then go get a master's. So that ever changed me would consider. So I feel like it would, kind of kill two birds with one stone. It would encourage technicians to go into the field. They'd have somewhere to move forward to, instead of, because right now the only option is management. Not everyone wants that.
Yeah.
And so, to keep that techs in the field, because then they have somewhere to go, they enter the field. They kind of feel like the UPA, they're going to lose even more vet techs entering the field, because they're going to either just go to like that assisting school, or to the VPA thing, and then technicians in between.
So Wayne, I know you have an answer. I'm going to start and I'm going to switch it over to you. So I do have to say this. So that's been my mantra from the get-go, is we need to have, to get into veterinary school, you do not have to have a bachelor's degree. So why would you have to have a bachelor's degree to get into the VPA program? Now, Wayne's going to tell you in a second that to get the initial approval, they have to put it that way, but then I think he's going to tell you, might be asking for an exception at some point. The ideal and the hope is that the associate's degree and experience for RVTs will meet most, if not all, of the pre-qualifications to get into the master's degree program eventually. Wayne, did I lie?
No, you didn't. You're exactly right. It's an absolute requirement now that in order to enroll in a master's program, all students must have a bachelor's program. It makes no sense to me, though, that they don't have to have a bachelor's degree to enroll in our DVM program. So once the program's approved, we will try to address that. But at this point, we've got to get the program approved, and so only those with bachelor's degrees will be eligible to apply.
And Wayne, can you tell me if Lincoln Memorial's program allows associates or?
Yeah,
they-
thank you. So, no, they suffer from the same handicap or being, handcuffed as CSU. So their students also have to have a bachelor's degree. And to speak to that, their program restricts enrollment to licensed veterinary technicians. Licensed veterinary technicians with a bachelor's degree. Now, that's a very small pool of students. So, that's one of the reasons why we're not doing that. But ideally, sometime in the future, we can, have sort of an equivalency, certain number of years in clinical practice makes it equivalent to having a bachelor's degree, and therefore they're eligible to enroll in the program. That's my hope.
With the LMU program, when they presented to our working groups about this, I found it really interesting that they had at one point looked at the program as being an alternative path to vet school, and then they decided to focus it just for technicians. So that they, I think, purposely changed their program to be focused on technicians and masters for technicians. And that was really interesting to me because I had just been hearing like LMU, VA program, whatnot, and they really said, we recognize we need to focus on technicians, and that's what they decided to do. And it, from what I understand, the LMU program is not trying to give anything around diagnosis, prescribing, or can I wrong about that? But I think that's how their program got developed.
Do you want to speak to it, Wayne?
Well, I've spoke with the dean of the program and who has committed that they expect that their program would change if there are changes to the Practice Act that would allow those graduates to do more. So their program is currently working towards what they're currently would be allowed to do, under the current Practice Acts. But Stacy has said that if there's changes to the Practice Acts that allow them to do more work, they're going to change their training program to train to that.
Surgery. Surgery. Okay.
And during the quiet time, I would also add there's a number of other schools that are similarly looking at programs, but I'm not going to mention who they are because they're waiting to see what happens in Colorado and some of these other states like Florida. I assume you made the announcement of the very positive news that came out of the state of Florida.
Okay, then we do have a question.
Gloria's question.
I think there's a question regarding what other states have
Sorry. Yeah.
VPA.
Yes, Gloria.
Yeah, are there any states that currently have a VPA program? I would assume that's in their Practice Act.
So this is ground zero. So we are the ones that everyone's watching. And there are about 8 states that have said that if we can pass it, they're going to try. We hope that if we pass a ballot measure, other state legislatures will say, hey, we don't want ballot measures. We want to have more of a say in the process, and they won't have to invest in a ballot measure, and they will have better discussions about guardrails and make it a collaborative effort. That's the goal. We don't want to see ballot measures across the United States. I will share that in Florida, the Florida legislature is also a little strange. And
Not surprising,
all
really.
legislators are really strange. They kind of have a really short session. So a new bill rarely gets through both the House and the Senate in one year. It kind of goes through one and then it comes back the next year. But it was introduced in the Senate. And Florida Senate this year, a BPA bill was.
It was introduced in the House.
In the House. See, I had a 50-50 chance.
I do it that way.
It was introduced in the House in Florida and it passed unanimously in the House. So there's a very good chance that Florida will be looking at this next year. And they're kind of, the reason their legislatures like this so much is they're anti-regulation and feel like this is regulating a lack of competition in the future.
Okay. So we had a pre-submitted question. how will the creation of a VPA help rural communities? The community I grew up in had 2 small animal veterinarians within 30 minutes then, but now both have retired and the closest is 45 minutes from my family's home. As a result, my family doesn't feel comfortable having another animal because of the worry about care and the inconvenience of having to travel so far for care.
So I have a couple thoughts on that. Under the ballot language, it says supervision of a veterinarian and as delegated to by a veterinarian. We did not define in the ballot language whether it's direct or indirect supervision. And then we left that up to the state board to determine. If, and some of our initial policy drafts actually said, if you're in a veterinary shortage area, it would be indirect supervision. If there is an allowance for indirect supervision, then a VPA, much like a nurse practitioner or a PA, can go out and, actually see clients without the veterinarian right there, as long as they were given permission, it was delegated, they know the boundaries of what they can do, they have easy access to that veterinarian. And so that could absolutely increase access to care for those folks. It just really depends how the state board writes the rules.
Yes.
My question is like where Dr. Palchak asked up here, how does this expand access to care with respect to those clients who cannot afford veterinary care, if this is primary focus on increasing revenue? In animal control, that's a huge cost problem about it. We go through a lot of neglect cases because people can't afford vet care, right? I mean, I make a good wage and I can't afford vet care, and that's the reason, that was preventing me from adopting that dog myself. Yeah. But, that's a huge, how can this help that situation?
2 thoughts on that. One is the more people that are able to provide, that are experts that can provide the service, especially if they have half the student debt to do so, the more that they can provide service at an accessible cost or a low cost. But the other one that I think is equally as important is there are many national groups funding access to care, funding, subsidized veterinary care, vaccines, spaying, whatever that looks like. But there are many programs that cannot provide, even utilize the funding. They can't hire anyone to utilize that. So by having more people that can be hired to do that, then that funding is not building a pathway, giving people hope, and there's no one there to do the service, even though the funding is there. So I think those 2 things go together.
Yeah, I think too, we're looking at demand versus supply. And our demand is so high and our supply is so restricted that things are more expensive. That is how, the economics curve works. And so if we can increase the supply of people who are able to provide care, then maybe we can release some of those valves that are making it so inaccessible for people. Or at least our community. Unless there's enough.
Well,
but there's
it's not going to make
30% of people. Maybe those 30% of people will now get care. So you're not losing. This, the demand is still there. It doesn't go away. It's still the number of people.
Yeah, the price is still released. You don't get a discount price for a practitioner.
I think you might. I think you in some constructs, you absolutely would. Yeah, it just depends on who's running the practice and who's making the rules, right? But absolutely, that could be a thing.
And definitely with telehealth, we've seen that can be a little bit more of a fixed, lower cost for some things, because now you're not going to the hospital for something that could be addressed online.
Okay.
I think we're practicing that anyway. I'm just looking with that, and within that year, there'll be things on the phone.
We're trying to make it accessible for people that can't get to the vet in the first place.
So I think we've got time for. Oh, sorry, did you?
I was just gonna say, I'm in Autism Foundation, we're state funder here in Colorado, but we talk about funding the pharmacy, people about their issues. We can write a check, but we can't use some rich veterinarian to see monkeys, and we nobody can. It's a really long time to grow a veterinarian, or even and it's a much shorter process looking at the CPA. I see it as an opportunity to potentially grow taxis, especially in rural areas or even in urban environments where there's pharmacies, a veterinary clinic, or veterinarians who are not retiring tomorrow. where folks need care. And so just having a veterinarian or someone with, a VP level schooling would open up a world of conversation and opportunity for those communities. And then, we also get calls to that end, we get called a lot for folks who've gotten the grant and say, like, "Oh, we asked you for this amount of money to do these surgeries or to do this level of care. We can't do that anymore because one veterinarian is hired and the one who came in is trying to do double of the other one because they don't have the staff." This would address that issue, so they would be able to hire a mid-level practitioner, perhaps a little bit less, to have access to care for those people who are paying double just because they're working on bodies. I think that's the situation. I think they're really into the body issue here.
Did I see another hand? Okay.
It's almost 3.
So there is the question of, if we can't get veterinarians and technicians into underserved areas, how are we going to get VPAs into those areas? Do you
So
want
just real
to?
quick, and it's probably the last
Yeah,
question, so we
yeah,
need to wrap
yeah.
up. So, I'm making up a number here, but let's say 10% of veterinarians are willing to work in rural areas, which is probably not far off, true, fortunately. 10% of VPAs are likely to do the same thing. So that's one way to look at that, because that would really increase access there. But the other way is a more accessible program that doesn't, and hopefully, and I've also talked to Dr. Jensen about this as well, entrance requirements that are really friendly to rural areas and people that want to go back to their communities and to serve those communities will be key to opening up more resources for rural communities where there's shortages.
And I do want to point out, Representative Karen McCormick has introduced a bill that I believe is in-house, I forget what committee, is it House Ag?
Committee.
On Monday, I think I saw, that would provide state income tax credit for veterinarians who are either taking jobs in or buying practices in underserved and under-resourced areas. Right at the moment, we've not seen any amendments to that bill. So right at the moment, that bill does specify geographic region. So it kind of goes to that sort of rural question. I have personally suggested to her that might be expanded to under-resourced areas as well, because besides shelter medicine, my obviously personal interest, I do know that many of our emergency practices are also struggling to hire. So, and the way that bill is written, those under-resourced areas are defined by the Department of Ag. So it could be done. It could be updated periodically if we all of a sudden had, 50% of CSU's veterinary class going into shelter medicine and wanting to stay in Colorado each year for the next 5 years, we'd be in great shape. So, but anyway, keep track of that bill, because that will, regardless of whether or not she expands it to practice areas, that bill could have an impact on our rural areas, which would be.
Is it limited to large animal or
No, it's not. It's not to practice type. It's taking a job or buying a practice in an under-resourced or underserved area, I believe is how it's defined. It does, like I said, that it does specify geographic, but that's a particular area. And we are 1 minute over. I want to thank everybody. I want to, first of all, thank our presenters, Dr. Jensen, Dr. Steele, Ellie. Thank you very much. And thank you to the ASPCA for sponsoring today, making the space, the meals and everything available. And I want to again thank everybody from the AWAC's Education Committee and Collaboration Committee for all of your work and also making this possible. So tours.
Come up here.
Yeah, anybody who's
Can we just talk about next steps? So when would we know if it was appealed, was successful?
We can keep AWAC informed.
Okay.
If,
it didn't come up.
there is, I think it's about a month before we know that about that appeal, is that right?
Yeah, but that doesn't limit what.
But
we
we're
can
gonna
do now.
start collecting signatures now.
Okay, and so the kickoff event is April 4th.
Yes.
And then if we get enough signatures, which will likely happen, then what does that look like from there?
November ballot to the voters this year
We have to put signatures.
till August 5th.
Yes.
5th,
Sounds right.
August 5th.
Can I
Yeah.
ask one thing?
Yep.
Sorry, me and no, I want in the room. I just want to make sure people are aware that this idea that the bill that was the BPA bill, when it got the reason why it got stalled isn't just because of COVID. There was definitely CDMA, CACT, and the professionals who this idea is going to affect the most have strong opposition. That's kind of the elephant in the room. That's kind of why some of us here are like, hey, wait, what about this? What about this? And so I think one thing that is definitely a concern is this idea that instead of looking at trying another ballot or another bill with collaboration, was let's just go to ballot and let's just bypass this process and get it to the voters and put a very simplistic title on and have people say, yeah, I will get it, let's vote. And that makes sense, right? Like, I agree with you. I think you're going to get support. I think what's really concerning is that in the Colorado shelters, the people doing these jobs right now vastly don't support this idea. And we are not really able to express that.
And I hear you, but I will
Yeah.
say there are veterinarians and technicians in shelters throughout the state that I'm hearing overwhelming support. So you're seeing one thing, I'm hearing and I know I've heard the message that they don't want to say anything. It's not just to me, it's throughout. So I feel like there are two opinions there.
Okay.
Secondly, with the bill not getting introduced and getting forwarded, the way that the CVMA and the CACBT and then proponents of the bill should have addressed this is have it introduced and have a committee and have a
See
hearing
no
and
kill.
listen to.
See the
Not-
rescue.
Yeah, see the Rescue Act, see all the other bills. It's 4 years of trying that. So us to do that for a 5th year or a 6th year is simply the definition of insanity at this point. We would have loved to have a hearing on that bill and be able to do it the way that it should have been said.
And I think, those of us, whether it's executive directors, CEOs, director of operations, within the shelters and rescue groups within Colorado, I also think it's incumbent upon us, once it gets on and passes, to have that conversation, to have a conversation now about it, but also to continue to have that conversation about what would make sense within our particular organization. Is this a position that does make sense? What does that look like? What are we also doing to support our technicians? For those who do want to do the veterinary technician specialist, what are we doing to help support them? For NOCO Humane, I will say that we invest a significant amount of our continuing education dollars, and we do a fair amount across the board. But obviously, our veterinarians and our veterinary technicians, as well as our animal control officers, are some of the places because they need those CEs to maintain their certifications. And I can't say that's true of every agency, but there are a lot of us who invest in the professional growth of our staff and our veterinarians and our veterinary technicians. We need to continue doing that, and we need to have these conversations. So I don't think the conversation goes away. I think it continues.
Hasn't really been open yet. I think it's been,
Amen, sister.
yeah.
I mean, that's how we feel.
Yeah.
You know, we're like,
I think that it's, I think right now it just feels like there's one side that's pushing one way and another side is like, whoa, and you're right, like there's no middle ground that has been met on. And I think what's really concerning is this, like, now it's a ballot initiative, like, okay, well, instead of trying to keep our community together, I feel like this is saying, we're just gonna potentially drive some distance apart. And that's concerning as a shelter veterinarian. I don't want to see
this community gets split because of this issue, right? Because we all want improved access to care. We all know that we need to do more for families. But I think that we have medical professionals that are saying, hey, this isn't gonna help us, and this actually is gonna create more well-being concerns for us. And yet we're now being faced by the organizations we work for to say, well, we're gonna do this despite our concerns. And so that's hard. And I don't, I don't want veterinarians and technicians to feel uncomfortable being able to have this conversation. And I also don't want them to say, well, gosh, now, I don't know, I don't know that I want to keep working in the animal welfare space. No, the number one reason why vets and techs leave this space is because of this tension, because of this challenge with leadership. Veterinarians you can read this all over the place. This is one reason why they don't stay in the animal welfare. And that's concerning.
I think
So-
one thing I have to push back a little bit though, is we're talking about this like pet owners aren't a stakeholder. And I would argue that this is the only group that is looking out for those stakeholders. We are the ones who see the suffering pets. We're the ones who get the relinquished pets. We're the ones who see the pets that should have gotten vet care a year ago. And so we are their voice. I'm not worried that AVMA is not represented at the Capitol, but I am worried that the people that come in our doors aren't getting the care they need. And so we need to expand it. And if it's the voters that are saying, yes, I feel I am not getting the care I need, please do something, then, I think the reason that we know this is a successful ballot measure is because that is how people are feeling. That is the reality. And they deserve to have a voice too.
And animals are suffering, but I hear you. I do. And I would love to continue the conversation. Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. If you wanted to, or we have to go. If you wanted to, just
So
come meet me up
virtual
here.
participants, thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Henson again, thank you.
Yeah.